Welcome to Hiero Exclusive. I'm Andrew Lay, CEO of Hiero Graphics. Entrepreneurship taught me most of what I know the hard way. Over time, I realized I wasn't alone in that experience. That's the idea behind this podcast, exploring how entrepreneurs and operators make real decisions and what they learn when theory meets reality. Because behind every company and every success story, there is a life story. And inside those stories are patterns that can help the next generation of builders move faster and think better. One pattern becomes obvious if you spend enough time around founders. They tend to see the world differently. They connect ideas others miss, pursue opportunities others overlook, and often feel compelled to build something that does not exist yet. But that same mindset can create challenges. Visionary leaders often struggle with focus, communication, or translating big ideas into consistent execution, which raises an interesting question. What actually makes the founder mindset different, and how can leaders learn to work with that wiring instead of against it? Today's guest spends her time helping founders answer exactly that question. Lisa Tarkington works with visionary leaders and entrepreneurs to help them better understand how they think, identify the inhibitors that hold them back, and develop the clarity needed to turn ideas into action. So today we're going to explore what it really means to be a visionary thinker and what founders can learn about themselves along the way. Lisa, welcome to Hiero Exclusive.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Oh, me too. And just a little disclaimer: I to the audience, I do use Lisa as a coach, so I great value from the conversations. So trying not to make this just a free session for me today, and something that's valuable that people can take out.
Well, it's been great working with you, so I'm excited to be on here to talk about it.
Awesome. So, being that you work with a lot of founders and visionary leaders. When someone says visionary, what does that actually mean in terms of how their brain works?
Oh man, if I could put it into a very simple way, I would, but I think the best way to describe a visionary is someone who really thinks forward facing. They're always thinking about what's next, 10 years out. How do we be different, innovative? And there's something about a visionary, and the reason they're called that too is because they can literally visualize what they want it to look like, but that doesn't mean that they have every step along the way figured out. They just know, like, this is where I want to go, and then there's messy chaos up to that point. So I think one of the coolest things with visionaries is that they have a different mindset than anybody else because they're able to see it before it even happens. That also can cause friction a lot with people as well because other people can't see it. So to them, that doesn't make sense yet.
Right.
And so then they have to bring people along for the journey. They have to communicate effectively, which is also hard when you're like, I'm already here and everybody else is quote unquote behind on that.
Right. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And I think that's interesting that I never saw that overlap before. As the visionary, you can see it. And I mean, hence the name, right?
Name, yes. Yes.
But are there other, say, traits or mental patterns that you see over and over again in founders that are maybe different than the general population, or let's say normal people?
Yes, I think a lot of things. So I'm first going to say there's a lot of visionaries out there who don't know that they're visionaries. Okay. And one of the things is sometimes a creative mindset. But I think one of the things that I see a lot with visionaries is so I'll give you an example of when I was younger, I was not great at art. So I thought I was not creative.
Okay.
I insinuated that those two would go together. But when you come out into this world, you can see that visionaries show up in a variety of different ways. Your expertise is very different than mine, but we're creative in which we're doing things. And so a visionary has this creative lens because they can see what needs to exist in the world that maybe doesn't yet, or it might exist in the world, but they think about it in a different pattern. So their minds are very intriguing there. The other thing is that everybody has, I always say, 47 tabs open in their brain. I think a visionary has more than that because they have multiple projects and they're able to context switch way faster than most people can because they're getting new data all the time. And then they're like, okay, we got to switch over here and switch over here, which can be very exhausting. I've also seen a lot of visionaries because they go hard. I call them 0 to 100s sometimes that they burn out quicker. Now, there are other roles that people burn out in, but the visionary, I see that sometimes because if they don't have the support needed, that shows up where then projects fall to the wayside or they have to do it all. The other thing I see sometimes with visionaries is there are too many projects. They have too many ideas and they want to do them all at once versus stacking them. I always say too, the biggest thing with visionaries is it's really hard when other people are telling them like not to do something because it can also bring them down a little bit because they know that it's possible, but they can't articulate yet how to do it. And so everybody else, quote unquote, can think, I'm going to put quotes around it, crazy in a sense. Right. And I love my crazy people.
Yeah. So that's an interesting way to put it. And I've heard entrepreneurs specifically, so still in that same mindset there, described before as unrealistically optimistic.
Yes.
So it's like, you know, and many entrepreneurs find there's many failures on the way to that path of success, which is an interesting resilience that there's still that unrealistic optimism.
Yeah. I mean, we've probably all seen the photos, or maybe I see them more because I work with this sector of people where there's this visualize that's like in the morning you start off, today's going to be a great day. An hour later, oh no, today's going to be horrible. And it's just like this, like every hour changes and fluctuates. And I think that's the entrepreneur's journey. Things shift and change, or I'm saying we because I'm an entrepreneur, is that we pivot a lot too because we can see with the data that we have what needs to shift. We try not to stay stagnant as well. And I bring up, the visionary entrepreneur can be very different than the entrepreneur who is really good at operations, from the entrepreneur who is really good at being the expert. So you can be multiple things, but the visionary is just a whole different ball game. Okay. And I say that because it's a different ball game if you are trying to build a company and you can see out where we want to go, and you're now in charge of change management in a way because you're trying to help people come along for the journey when it doesn't make sense yet.
Right. So is there a cool name for operations too, or is it just operations?
Operations people are usually called the implementers.
Implementers, yeah.
Yes, okay. The implementers. So I work a lot with visionaries and implementers because the implementers have to figure out how to take the brain of the visionary and make it come to life and actually be structured and work for the company and work for the clients. And then the visionaries also have to learn how to work with the implementers and how to communicate to them effectively. Now, I've also seen when visionaries and implementers, there are some that just don't work well together based off of personalities. I've seen some that, you know what, if they didn't have their right-hand person or they didn't have their visionary, the company wouldn't do well because they don't have the strategic, like visionary moving us forward. And then they don't have that implementer who's making sure that all the tabs are kind of staying afloat in a way. Right,
systems oriented.
Systems,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So in my company, the saying is that Emily Kate Lorenz, she's our operations manager there, that she is the order to my chaos. That is our balance. And I'd say too that I have the most empathy on her because she has to deal with me, because when I make these decisions, it's like she feels the impact and the responsibility from those as well, which sometimes requires giving me a little bit of pushback so that I understand the context of things, because I am that 0 to 100 instantly. So yes, I can relate there.
Well, and I think what's cool for her role is that she's not saying to you, like, forget all of your ideas. She just she meets you where you're at and saying, we can do this, but here's what will have to change, or here's what has to shift. I think the other cool thing in both of those roles is there is chaos in the visionary's brain, but there's a lot of order as well. And so when order in the brain might not come out of our mouths like order, because it makes sense up here, but to put it, and then the implementer has the really cool thing of taking all the puzzle pieces and making it make sense to the next level of people that are learning it.
Right.
I think that is really cool role for people if they embrace it. Now, I understand the frustration. I do sometimes with visionaries, but I also think when you can work with a visionary and you don't shut down their vision, instead you just bring, order to their chaos.
Right.
It's a really beautiful partnership.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Great way to put it. And let me ask, because I think this is interesting and related to the last episode I had with Terry Duperrin, and we talked a little bit about, isn't he? Yes.
Yes.
But we talked a little bit, of course, about, a common topic with him was he had dyslexia, and how much he turned that from a weakness into a strength, into a tool of success. And so there was a thought that I had with that episode, which was, what if the same things that inhibit regular education are actually advantages in other areas for solving problems, creating new things, and so forth? So just a question about your perception on this. After working with so many founders, do you think great entrepreneurs, and you could go visionary or operations or implementers there, do you think they're wired differently, or do you think they simply learn to think differently over time?
I think both can be true. The dyslexia thing is very intriguing to me, and it's something that I've really wanted to understand more of, and I need to do more research on, because I have that, and many people that I do know have it. I was just watching Shark Tank recently, and one of them was sharing that they have it. And I'm watching these people that are like, things don't make sense sometimes in how they show up or like how they write things or certain things, but in their brain it makes sense. And so they do have to learn differently. Yeah. They do have to be maybe more verbal in which they're speaking. And I think for a long time, and I'll go back to what Terry said, I think a lot of times it was looked at as a not a great thing for someone to have, right? Because no one understood it. And I look back at many times in my corporate job where that showed up for me. But I didn't know it. They didn't know it. And so it hindered my growth.
Right.
And then once you start to understand, oh, wow, there is a lot of people that are like me out in this world, you start to kind of, I'm going to say, like the sense of relief that visionaries are like, it can be normal in the visionary world, right? I'm going to say that normal compared to everybody else. I think that is really cool. I think that the one thing that, regular in which we learn in the school versus like how some of us have to like learn differently. It's the same thing with communication styles. It's really what it is. It's learning styles differently, communication styles differently. Unfortunately, we didn't know all of those things when we were younger. I still think to this day we haven't figured it all out. I certainly have not. I think the best thing that I'm going to go back to even like just like kids for a second, the best thing a parent can do is try to learn, but also help their kid flex to learn other ways too. And then they can figure that out. And then I think it's the same thing as leaders, because we also now have to bend for people that aren't visionaries because they learn differently. So I can sit here and tell you today how I need to have my SOP, my standard, operating procedure. But that's going to look differently probably for my team than what comes out of my brain.
Right.
And so it's how do I help my team and how do I help myself understand how we all learn differently, but also find that middle ground, because I can't flex so much when my brain doesn't allow me to. And they can't flex so much if their brain's not allowing them to. And then there's just mass chaos if we don't find that middle ground. Does that answer that question a little bit?
Yeah. And it actually brought an interesting thought to me in what we were talking about the relationship between the visionary and the implementer is the implementer is actually the middle grounds in between that visionary and the rest of the people. So where you had just said there, like it's important that visionaries learn to adapt, maybe realize that you're a little bit different. The thought I just had is the implementer is kind of the interpreter,
Yes.
the person that tries to understand the visionary and then creates the system to hand that off and carry that vision forward.
Yeah. So. And I think the coolest thing an implementer can do and a visionary is celebrate it. Because how easy would it be is to get from the visionary this great idea that they think is great. They're celebrating, they're coming in cheering, like, I have this great idea. And the implementer completely shuts that person down because they now have to process how they're going to implement it.
Right.
And so I totally get where the implementer is coming from, right? Like,
you just created a bunch of work,
Yes. But when you do that, then the visionary trust can be lost a little bit because they're like, well, I'm trusting you with this. And I got so excited. Is
Right.
also too, the visionary probably thought about this all night long and already has a spreadsheet created and
Right.
is ready to start. Like
Right.
it doesn't leave their mind when they have an
Right.
idea. And so finding that balance is really key to your point. But it's also, yes, it's saying to the team then, hey, like we're going to pivot here and here's why. And this is why I'm on board with it. Now, if they're not on board with it, that's a whole nother discussion that the visionary has to have with the team. But I do like when they can find that common ground, which I get both sides. I think that that's the beautiful thing of what I get to do is I see both sides, but then it's also really cool when you can embrace both of their skill sets versus hindering the skill set.
So do you have a favorite side of working with, of the implementer or the visionary, or is it the relationship more that is your passion between those two?
I think that's a great question. I think for me, visionaries intrigue me because what I want to do for them is to let them know that their ideas can flourish. I'm really big on, sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a lot because I know what I can come off sometimes. But I always say, like, I never want anybody to ever feel in a visionary role that their idea is too big because that's not fair it came to their mind for a reason. And when there's a will, there's a way. That's how I look at things. I also think for the implementer, really giving them perspective of what's going on in the visionary's brain is extremely helpful because it is really hard sometimes for the visionary to articulate why they pivoted, why it shifted. It's usually off of just like instinct and it's off of data that they've given. And sometimes it's like, I don't know why I feel this way, but I really feel like we should be doing this. And it could sound crazy to other people, but it's usually a natural instinct of the visionary that's coming alive. And so I don't have a favorite, but I would say the relationship and the relatability, but also just being like the calm for it of saying like, I hear you. Here's some different perspectives to give you. And here's some assumptions and judgments you're making.
I love it. So when you're working with visionaries, a word that I learned right up front with working with you was inhibitors. What would you say, working with a lot of high-performing people, what are the most common inhibitors that hold visionary leaders back?
Restlessness is one of the key ones. Hyperachiever is another one. And controller is another one. Now, all of these things are not bad things. I remind everybody, like, they can only inhibit you if you've hit a certain threshold where it could over a line where it could be too far. But restlessness is definitely one of them. So sometimes I've seen with some visionaries where they get so excited about something, the launch happens and they're so pumped and then they're, okay, I'm done. Let's move on to the next thing. Raise my hand. I've been there, right?
Yeah.
Where it's just like, okay, now what do we build? Now
Right.
what do we build versus
Right.
what do we sustain a little bit? It's not a bad thing. It's just learning that because you have this restlessness. So you have to find out where to put that restlessness energy. Do you put it in that project that you're working on now, or are you creating 7 different projects for your company that could spread people pretty thin?
Right.
So you have to figure out where that energy is because restlessness to some people can mean a new project, which to your team could be another thing we have to do.
I see.
And again, not a bad thing. It's just where you put your energy. Another one is controller, not knowing how to delegate. Like many visionaries are usually sometimes founders, entrepreneurs, or working for a company. And so they hold it. They're like, but I built this and I want this to go my way. And they don't mean it in a bad way. It's their baby in a way.
Yeah.
So then what they have to figure out is how do they delegate and how do they trust the next level of people to take on those tasks or responsibilities. Hyperachiever shows up as well. Visionaries are very hyperachiever because, again, they have big, ambiguous goals and no one is stopping them from achieving that goal. They could have this crazy goal and they will figure out how to meet it. But to everybody else, they're like, are you crazy? How are we going to do that? Well, this is how many people work for us. It doesn't make sense. But again, the visionary can really get hyperachiever. And so again, that can be could stop someone from growth because the team is like, how are we going to meet these standards? And then people can get burnt out.
Yeah.
So again, these are great things to have in a person. It's just when you overextend yourself to a certain degree with them, how it can affect other people.
Yeah, it's like there's something else that naturally comes with them that you have to watch out for.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the signals, like either say restlessness or a high achiever? What are some of the signals that tell you that might be an underlying issue of that visionary?
Yeah. So sometimes for the hyperachiever, it's tying our worth to work. I think everybody does that. A lot of people do that. So I couldn't even say that with a visionary. I'm just going to use the hyperachiever. So there are people that are hyperachievers that aren't visionaries, point blank.
Right.
And so I'll just use the hyperachiever is where we tie our worth to our work and the outputs in which we give. And so if I'm going to achieve this, you're going to get those like good feelings, like I've achieved this. Okay, next one. And that's just a hyperachiever, not even just for a visionary. And so if you start to notice, like after you hit a goal, you're like, hey, what's next? Versus like celebrating in that moment of, I just did something crazy. Let's take a minute and take a beat. That could be a sign that you just keep trying to set the bar higher. Again, not a bad thing, but just being aware of it. The other thing with hyperachievers is, again, that worth piece. Like, what if work was taken away tomorrow? Who are you?
Right. Yeah.
What does that look like? How does Andrew show up differently if he didn't have his company? Same with me. How do I show up? Controller, I'll use that one for the example. It can really hurt you when you're saying to yourself, I'm so exhausted and burnt out, and people have offered to help you on your team, but you're like, I got it, because you think that you are burdening them.
Right.
But in reality, what you're not doing is empowering them.
Right.
Right. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. And then restlessness is when you are context switching so much in the day from project to project, where you tell yourself at the end of the day, if only I would have had 8 hours to focus on this one project, I know that it would be X amount better than what it is today. Well, it's because you're spread so thin, and it's because that restlessness is used to create new projects, new ideas, versus focusing on the 2 or 3 and going deep. You're going wide, not deep.
Right.
Again, not a bad thing, but it also could hinder you long term.
It's like you're speaking to my soul with some of this stuff.
Trust me, I speak to my soul when I talk about it. I'm like, yep, reminder.
Yeah. So do you see founders struggle more, say, with internal challenges like doubt or clarity, or more external challenges like communication with their team?
That's a really great question. I think it depends on the season. So I think when so I'm going to use this as an entrepreneur, not just visionary. So I'll start there, is when you're in charge of making sure that people are paid, and that you're the reason why they can pay their mortgage and, keep the lights on in their home, put food on the table for their families. There is a different level of stress that many people cannot relate to until you're in that position. And then when things get tight, the stress gets real, especially for a visionary who knows what could happen, meaning like they can see what will happen with the company one day.
Yes.
But today it might not be there. And so then they have to make really hard decisions. And that is then when the doubt comes in, am I ever going to achieve this? Where did this vision come from? Maybe this is stupid, right? Like we tell ourselves all of those stories. And on the external side, it's also, I want to make sure that my team feels like we're not stressed for money. Because I've got it and I'm going to carry that on my back. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs and visionaries feel those pieces. From the standpoint of communication, I think it's really hard. Sometimes we actually, like I always say, like visionaries need to put a picture, like actually draw a photo of what it looks like, because it is so hard. Sometimes it's hard to articulate, or you might be saying it to someone and it's clear what you're saying, and then they repeat it and you're like, that's not what I meant at all. But it's not because of it's not because of a lack of trying. It's just how the interpretation. And so I always say if a visionary is struggling to articulate that, it just means that they have to keep practicing it and asking the people, having the people ask them more questions to get it out of them. For me, I'm a very verbal person, especially with communication. So if you were to ask me today, Lisa, write down everything that's in your brain, I'd be like, no, but I can tell you exactly what it is, but let me just verbalize it. So finding what works for you is going to be key. And then having people around you who know that about you and supporting you. I grew up in a household where no one was an entrepreneur. No, construction workers, engineers, nurses, right? That's what I grew up with. And so to have the brain that I had as a visionary from a young age to sell ornaments at school because I wanted to, give money to Toys for Tots. No one else was selling ornaments at school, but I thought, if I can do this, imagine how many kids I could help. Again, that wasn't a thing growing up. You think about then, I left my corporate career to go into the entrepreneur world. And I was just talking to my mom about this. And she goes, yeah, there were some moments where we were a little, what's going on? Is she like, but it was all because this vision, I couldn't get out of my brain and it just would sit there. And so I'd slowly work on it. But as you can imagine, there are the moments where you get this idea and I'm like, I just need my laptop now. And I can be fully focused on a project for 8 hours because that finally became clear. And so I think visionaries can explain it better once it gets clearer and clearer over time.
Yeah. And that relating to something earlier you said there about visionaries being able to articulate that vision or the reason for that pivot. That's something that's been a skill that I've been slowly building over time. It's took a long ways to get to where I am now, where I can articulate this big picture and then walk through the sequence and help people understand better. But that was actually very difficult to get to. And another thing that you said there that I find interesting and rather profound, that much of society doesn't realize this, to the point where my business, dealing with a lot of other business owners, that I wanted my team to be able to understand business owners better. And not enough of the younger generation especially understand or appreciate that. So I would begin to have these talks about the plight of the small business owner. Now, sometimes I would be talking about me, but I wouldn't let them know.
Yes.
We're good, of course.
Yeah, we're good. Okay. Yes, exactly.
So, but that is so true about, I never knew that level of stress until I had, monthly bills that exceeded yearly salaries that I used to make, and that was a lot when you see tight months happen and so forth. It's a lot, and you need to look impervious to the team because we're charging forward.
Yes, and it's hard to not put that stress on or want to make pivots in the moment that can bring in quick money.
Right.
Because you're like, at the end of the day, what's more important, my vision or feeding people?
Right.
And that
Absolutely.
is very hard decisions. And so I have a lot of empathy for small businesses and even corporations who have to do these layoffs.
Right.
These are really tough decisions. And, it's very easy when I didn't know these implications and what this person felt when I didn't own a business. And now that you do, I reflect a lot on like, wow, I should have understood that role more because I probably would have had a lot more empathy. I also probably would have asked a lot more questions to make sure that person was good too, because they're also making some really hard decisions. And usually, and I've seen this with some entrepreneurs that I've worked with, their families don't get the paycheck then. They make sure every other family does. And so I've seen that along the way as well.
Right. Yes, that is unfortunately so common out there in small businesses where the small business owner is taking a short on the check to pay other people more and to, secure them.
Yep.
So how about this? Is there a mindset pattern you see repeatedly that it causes promising founders to stall or maybe even sabotage their own progress? Excuse me.
Well, first I'll share my own, and then I'll share. This is a pattern that I've seen. So I would say. Order is one of those things where I think order is important. I think I've learned that over the years more and more, that I've always been like, well, we'll fly the plane as we go. And I still have that. And I think every visionary has that. But I think there was a time about 10 years ago where I had about 17 different ideas. And I was sharing it with a business owner who I really respected. And they looked at me and said, these are all really great, but you can only pick 4. And I was like, how could I do that? There's no way. I'm going to prove him wrong. So I tried to prove him wrong. And I completely did all of them, but to a decent amount. but never to their full potential. And then I had the next discussion with him. Okay, I didn't listen the first time. Can we chat again? And then we were able to find out what I really like, if I could really focus my time, what could I see as the potential that maybe even some of those other pieces could come into it a little bit. And so I think that that's one thing that can hinder. If you don't have the teams, the systems, the money, like again, like I was starting out with those many ideas. I think you can add on as you grow. Right. I don't discount any of that, right? Like I'm really big on that.
Once you have an implementer managing it and running it.
Yes, and I didn't. I was like just throwing the balls up and hoping that like I could manage them all at one time. So I think that it is really great to have ideas, but first like, and again, I never like to hinder visionaries' mindsets, but it's like, what can we put to next year? It's not going to go away. But first you have to make money here to spend the money here, right. Or let's get this team in a really good place so that we can focus over here. Mm-hmm. Oh, you want to spend time with your family? Okay, let's get this thing really good, spend some time with your family, and then we can add this next piece on. And so it's hard for the visionary, I would say, is because they want everything now.
Right. Right.
We've all been there. And it's okay. But I think the biggest thing is like making sure that you don't put it and say like it's never going to happen. That's not fun for the visionary, Mm-hmm. But it's also just prioritizing their time a little bit. So I think that that's something that I've seen where it could hinder a little bit, or sometimes it's really hard to not give things the chance that they deserve. Now, again, factors go into all of those plays. So I try not to, again, like overextend it there, but it's able to look at the factors and be like, okay, we tried this. Did it work or not? And, there is a difference between waiting too long or closing it down too quickly. And so having to find that middle ground. And I think that only comes from experience, coaching, and just being really true and honest with yourself. I think another thing that I see with visionaries is the go, go, go mentality. Filling the workday with every minute. I teach a lot about time management. I also can fill my time very quickly, but visionaries need time to think. Mm-hmm. And that's where some of their best ideas come for so if they're not getting out in nature, they're not going for walks, they're not spending time with loved ones, because those are the moments where I have found that visionaries are like, I got it. And those are the most profound moments. And those usually can shift and change the organization for the better.
Right.
Did I answer that fully?
You did.
Okay.
I think that's great. And yeah, I mean that word balance. I think we were actually talking about it earlier today, right?
Yeah.
Like that is a hard thing to manage when you are go go go, when you are the high achiever, but I've got this thing that I'm aiming for. I want it yesterday.
Yes.
So.
Well, and I think one of the best things someone can do that is like that is have people around them that understand their mindset. So they're not trying to say like, hey, don't have big dreams, but also reflects back and says to them like, hey, remember when you said you wanted to spend more time with your husband? Are you doing that?
Right.
Like that check-in a little bit. And I think for me, there was something recent for me where I was like, go, go, go. And I had two people in my life literally say to me, remember that one time when you burnt yourself out? Do you think you're going to get there or not? And so we were able to have that conversation. And then I remember taking a call at, 9 p.m. one night, my choice. And my husband sat across the kitchen table from me afterwards and he goes, so I remember us having these discussions, like, is this something that we're going to keep doing? And, as long as it aligns to our values and where we want to go, or is this something that you're like, yeah, it could be, and you're not as excited about, but you're doing it because you feel like you should. Right. And those are the moments where you have to do a lot of reflection as a visionary, because the big ideas, they're there. They're not going away, but there's a lot of other human error that comes into play and just human life that also happens.
Yep. I think it's official. I am getting an extra session out of this. This is all great stuff. Yeah. I really appreciate how much you not only studied this, but experienced so much about it that really puts you in a really good position to do this coaching. Yeah,
I think one of the things that I always remind people is it sounds easy, doesn't it? Like Lisa's given us all this information. She's got the visionary mindset figured out. And I love this piece of my life. I think the messy middle is really hard for anybody.
Yeah.
It's hard to, back to the things that can stop you from your growth. It's those things that you have to be really reflective on. You have to ask for feedback. You have to have the hard truths with yourself. And also when you see the vision and things aren't going the way that you thought it would,
Sure.
how do you stay the path, knowing that there's going to be a lot of left and right turns and U-turns you're going to have to take, or the idea that you finally get to, you're like, well, crap, I had that 3 years ago, but we're back to it because all along you had it. You just got veered off by other thoughts that come along the way.
Right. Oh, that's good stuff. So let's talk a little bit more about, or a little bit about self-awareness. I know you mentioned that a little bit earlier. So when founders start working with you, what is the biggest aha moment they usually experience about themselves in the beginning, let's say?
Some of them don't even know that they're a visionary.
Okay.
Or are they surrounding themselves with the right folks to help their ideas come to life? They also have a lot of, I would say, I call them Band-Aids, things that we just kind of like put a little touch on it, but we're not willing to rip off the Band-Aid a little bit as well. And so I see those things coming up. I think too, patterns in which, how do I have different perspectives? How do I achieve my goals, but also, professionally, but also personally? I think there's a lot of things that visionaries come to me for, but I think one of the things that is really cool is when they can start to, I get to see them let go. And I think that is the most powerful thing for a visionary to do, because at the end of the day, holding the vision is tough. And you're also, I call it like air traffic in a way, because people on your team are also going to have ideas. So you're also, you're air traffic to leading them in a way, but you're also leading your brain of like, oh, that was a good idea, but does that fit into what we're doing? Like all of these different pieces. And so when you can start to let go of that is key. The hardest part is when you let it go and it doesn't go exactly perfectly. And then how do you manage those expectations? You don't take it back. You teach, you empower. And that's really hard to do because they're like, well, I was doing it great the first time. I think another thing that I've used this analogy a lot, and I would say to any visionary, is, are you surrounding yourself with your Stanley Cup team? And I use this analogy because a lot of people think that they want their Olympic team. Well, the Olympics happen every 4 years. The Stanley Cup happens every year.
Right.
And so don't you want the team that's going to rally together every year and make big plays to get the goal achieved? Yeah, we want that. So build the team that's like that versus the Olympic team that gets together every 4 years and gets a trophy. And then they go back and do their own thing.
Right. And it's not even just that they're competing for that once a year. It's they're working the whole year towards that competition as well.
Yes. And I see a lot with people are like, I want my Olympic team. I want the best of the best. Well, Stanley Cup still has to have the best of the best too. They just need a different type of person than what the Olympic team does. And so if you can understand what you need, and sometimes it's the scrappy person that's building, you need it differently. And I think that's really cool when you can say that. And I love also when visionaries can say, I don't have that. Great. I'm glad you know that. Now we can make some changes. And if you're saying I do, okay, let's level them up. But it's that reflection internally to say like, okay, I have to make shifts no matter what. But what am I going to do?
Yeah, and those are both huge. I think of the letting go one, and it's like the opposite of control, right?
Yeah.
Because like your baby and what you've developed, you have to let go. And even when it isn't going how you want it to go, you have to let them learn the lesson, and you have to come in and now be the coach and try to take things to a higher level, right?
Yes.
So, when you get people like that, let's just say, if you can get an example in your head without revealing anything of a visionary that you helped, let go. What did things look like before versus afterwards for them, just from implementing that?
Yeah. So I would say, when one comes to me that's a visionary, they already have the vision in their mind of what the sessions are going to look like. They have it perfectly planned out of exactly how we're going to work together. And I think the openness of trusting and letting go in those moments to say like, okay, I have these goals that I want to achieve. And we work really hard to achieve those goals. But I think what's the coolest piece is when they can let go and let the goals happen as they should. And they open themselves up to, this isn't what we said that we were going to be talking about. And it goes and shifts in a different way. And then they get to be vulnerable.
Right. Okay.
Because being a visionary can be lonely. You know, you can surround yourself with other visionaries and have big ideas, but at the end of the day, you still got to go home with that brain and unpack things.
Right.
And so I think it also allows people that sense of relief of, okay, what I feel, I'm going to be okay. I'm not crazy. There are people like me out there. I just needed to know more about myself, you know? And so I think that that's the coolest part is when someone can work with me and at the end, their goals that they want to achieve, we still achieve them, but they learn so much more about themselves, how to reflect and how to communicate. And I've seen that growth. I've also seen where halfway through, we're completely pivoting and changing everything that we plan to do together. And that is okay. And the point of that is that they had so much like going on in their brain that they were finally able to be reflective for a little bit and think differently and have someone just ask them questions and have them think differently because usually they're the ones leading.
Yeah. Yeah. And so do you get some of your visionary leaders that you're working with on that report back to, I have changed this now and I've done this. I have a different mind state now. This is the outcome in my business. Like, do you see things like increased retention, increased engagement, productivity? Like, what type of things do you see with that?
Yeah, I see what happens is the ripple effect. Hands down, ripple effect into their team. I've seen people, we call them the Lisa questions, where now they're asking the Lisa questions to their team. You know, they're thinking differently about how they're showing up. They're actually blocking time on their calendar and spending time with the people that they want to be with outside of, you know, their work family.
Right.
And then also sometimes it's, I do sometimes with some people the assessment of, you know, did you grow in certain areas? And it's really cool when we see the things that were maybe like holding them back decrease. So for an example, like someone might be a big avoider. They avoid hard conversations. And so they might be ranking themselves as a high number. And at the end, it's like a 1. I had one that turned like based off of something, it turned into a 0. And we both looked at each other on the screen. and in that moment, it was so amazing because you don't realize the small things until you're done. And you're like, wow, I changed a lot for the better, you know? And so I think productivity is a key one too, because you are more strategic with your time. You're looking at things differently. You're figuring out, what do I avoid? What do I control? And then also the empowerment as well. So I think there's a lot of different factors, but I would say overall the health is key. It also sometimes means that we're shaking things up, or I shouldn't say I don't ever do that. I let that person that's getting coached decide what they would like to change up, but it's all here in their gut and in their heart of what needs to change and be more aligned as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how important would you say self-awareness is for a founder? And how can someone start building that if they haven't worked with a coach before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start with a stat. So I use this in every time I teach. I always ask, raise your hand if you are self-aware. Basically, almost everybody in the room does. Then I flash up this slide that says 90% of people believe that they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% of people actually are.
Wow.
And I use that with a caveat. Now, I do believe a lot of people are self-aware, but we're self-aware in certain areas of our lives. We aren't in a multifaceted area where we could probably, we have blind spots. And that's part of self-awareness is understanding what are your blind spots.
Right.
I think when I think of self-awareness, in those moments where you leave a meeting and you might think to yourself like, oh, that didn't go the way that I planned. Oop, I talked too much. Oh, I shouldn't have said this. You kind of like are self-critical in a way, or that's the word that people put in there. And so I think it's self-awareness knocking at the door, saying to yourself like, hey, I'm noticing these same tendencies over and over again. And the biggest thing that you can do for self-awareness is not just notice anymore, but walk through that door. Don't let it knock anymore. Walk through that door and make a change. So if you're noticing like, oh, every time I go into the same meeting, I get defensive. Okay. What do I need to be doing differently? How do I need to show up differently? What's causing me to get defensive? Maybe it's that you haven't gotten feedback on a certain area that you're like, you know what? I really need some feedback here. Literally asking someone, hey, do you have any feedback on how I could come off this way differently? And it's being self-aware of, hey, there's something not feeling right. But then actually walking through that door and doing something about it is very key. And I see that not just with visionaries. I would say self-awareness is the number one skill I say to anybody that they need to work on, because it's also when you're in a room with different personalities, how are you still showing up your authentic self, but also understanding what the assumptions and who's in the room as well. Yeah. And so it's the number one skill in my head that everybody needs to have.
Right.
I just think it's also the hardest part for people is the self-awareness of, again, the knocking at the door and noticing it, but then it's walking through the door and actually putting that into action.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And one thing I was thinking about there that kind of ties back to what you were saying when the lady you were coaching went down to a 0 on that metric is the impact of Kaizen, of that small incremental commitment over time.
Yes.
1% a day doesn't seem like much. I just did a little bit better. If you did that 5 business days a week throughout the whole year, you just increased by 12x over the course of a year. So it's that powerful, and it's that surprising when you look back and see how far you come if you're consistently trying to implement those improvements.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a great point when it comes to visionaries. If we keep adding projects like these ideas into our brain, which I think ideas are fantastic, so I'm not dissing those, but it's like, then how do you grow and get better at these other areas that you really love too? And so unfortunately, I'm going to use the word balance again, but it's like, how do I find that balance for myself? Because you are right. If we can just focus on certain areas, we can grow, but we can't grow 20 different ways. We don't have enough time in the day because we can't have that much education and also do our jobs.
Right.
And so then it's choosing the path and having that self-awareness of where that focus is going to be.
Okay, that's great. Now, for someone listening right now who might feel overwhelmed or stuck in their business, what is the first mental shift you would want them to make?
So instantly my brain said, take a deep breath. And then go for a walk. Just go for a walk silently. Don't even play music. Just silently go and be with yourself for a while. And I think when you're overwhelmed, you need to ask yourself, what do I really need in this moment? Because it's instantly, what visionaries and entrepreneurs do? We put our heads down and we go to work to make whatever is going on better, even though we're completely overwhelmed. But when I see people overwhelmed, I literally have to say, like, you got to go take a break for just a second. Right. It's that mindset shift that, like, you need to let your heart and your brain breathe a little bit. And this is advice I have to give myself constantly. So I'm also, as I'm hearing my say this, I'm like, yep, this is a very true moment. The overwhelming piece then, too, is reminding yourself, like, everybody's putting their pants on the same way every day, and that you have to figure out what a priority looks like for you. Now, whenever I've thought about this, I remember someone saying that to me when I was overwhelmed, and I said, priority, I have 10 priorities right now. Right. What are you talking about? I remember that so well, and just like getting emotional over it, because I said, like, you don't know what this is like. Well, the person did. So I had to go take that walk and just take, what's that first next step? What's that first next, what are those little steps? And then what can I do today to play or find joy? Just take a break. And I think that that's the hardest part to do when you're overwhelmed, because that's the last thing you want to be doing.
It's illogical,
Yeah, it's illogical. Yes. Like, well, Lisa, why would I go do that? And then when you finally can sit with yourself, you can think more clear. The other thing I tell some people is you need a good night's sleep.
Right.
You need a good night's sleep, take some sleepy time tea and get a good night's sleep, and then call me in the morning and we can discuss it. But like, you are overwhelmed, and nothing I say, you're just going to get defensive because nothing I say is going to work.
Right.
And it's not because you don't care. It's just, you're struggling.
Yeah, your brain's too cluttered at the moment. It's too cluttered.
Yeah.
So I heard this one person on a podcast talk about meditation, and it was rather profound to me, and it made me realize something else that I did, and also like in practice, this is excellent. And it's basically when you meditate and you try to clear your mind, you have a problems that you're thinking about, life is going on, but you get that total calm, total stillness, and it's like, when you sit there for long enough, the answer's just going to come to you, and like what you said of taking the walk and just getting outside, fresh air and quietness. And then what I realized is there's so much where I drive without music, without a podcast, without anything. And it's like, yeah, that's my thinking time, I'm lost in thought. And then, of course, I'm like, well, maybe at some point I should have a chauffeur, but I don't want to be dangerous.
How did I get here?
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's just so profound, I think, and so true what you said about really emptying your mind, and it's the next best thing is going to come. And,
yes, and again, I know I keep saying that it does sound so simple. Because it is. It's just we in general, people, we like to overcomplicate things.
Right.
We do. Right. We like to overcomplicate things. I could tell you today, I have a whole system set up where I'm like, probably tomorrow if I went in with fresh eyes, I'd be like, oh, we don't need half of that. But it's because in the moment, if you're building something overwhelmed, you overwhelm it.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So just a perspective of what you've seen over the time doing this. What is something that founders often misunderstand about themselves or visionary?
Ooh, the first thing that came to my mind was what you think does become a reality. In a way of, I do think that visionaries, the thought came to you for a reason. It's just what you want to do with it, and because how many times have we had an idea and we put it to the side? And then we are maybe scrolling one day and we're like, oh my gosh, I had that idea. And then that person just like someone else is doing it, And so then we kick ourselves. So it's like, how do we like trust ourselves more? And that's the other piece that I would say is like, your gut is usually right.
Okay.
Trust your gut. It's telling you something for a reason. And if you're like, whoo, this feels good. Inch forward.
It, right?
Yes. Or charge. Yes. Inch or charge, whatever you prefer. The other thing too is if it doesn't feel good, that's telling you something too. And it might not make any sense of why something doesn't feel good, but listen to that as well.
Right.
It might not reveal itself right away, but that's another piece. And then I think and then just like how great it is to have a mind like you. I think for a long time, I've seen visionaries specifically feel like I have too many thoughts. I want to do too many things. People don't get me. People try to tear down my ideas. I'm a square trying to fit into a circle or something like that. And the more that you can learn about your own style, the more that you kind of just like level down, like level up, and also humble and like have this sense of relief of like, okay, I get to embrace who this person is versus continuously trying to hide from them.
Right.
And I think if we all just embraced ourselves more in that positive way that we all bring to the world and contribute, like how cool would that be? We all brought those strengths.
So that is awesome and also rather profound because I have been on a similar path with that. Actually, in Terry's Glimpses class, I felt like that unlocked something for me because I was heavily self-critical, heavily in the imposter syndrome. When people say, well, what college, what was your degree? And it's like, oh, public high school degree. That's my PhD.
Yeah.
So I learned through a lot of that because Terry had a way of saying things of like, I could fill the room up with things I'm not, but that's not what I have to offer the world, is it? And then when I heard his story as a high school dropout and everything that he built, and it's like he's sitting here telling me, Andrew, there's nothing wrong with you. You're special just the way you are. And he's such a great guy in what he puts together. So tell me, when people, when they begin to understand that is trust their instinct, trust your vision. What do you feel usually changes once they embrace that or see that more clearly?
Confidence.
Okay.
Confidence in themselves. Also, too, Again, back to there's a will, there's a way, but less chaos, more calm to their storm, because they, when you are unsure, it shows up.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up. The insecurities show up. I always say, like, start a business, anybody, you will learn more about yourself within 90 days than you ever have in your entire life, because literally it strips apart every insecurity that you have and it makes it very, very public to yourself, right? Like,
Right.
And so I think for visionaries, when you're clear on this is how I'm going to show up, you surround yourself on your team with people that can support that type of person versus bring them down. You can think clearly a little bit, even with all these ideas. You can also say, like, okay, I have all these ideas, but this is what I bring to the table. Again, surrounding yourself with strong people that understand you. And I just think that when you do, like, everything becomes clear, and then you meet more people and you're like, oh yeah, I'm like that too. Or, oh yeah, I'm nothing like that. I need that person because I can't think like that.
Right.
And then you're able to see your strengths more, and also not your weaknesses, but also just like areas that you actually don't need to even improve on, because you got people around you that are going to support you on those hard skills.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is so important as you're growing a team, I've found as well, because it's impossible to be polished and well-rounded at the same time and sharp at everything. So finding where your blind spots are, and then finding the people that cover those blind spots for you is like it makes a team so much more effective. It's like that Stanley Cup team. That there's different positions for different reasons.
Yes.
Right.
And I'll share something else that you brought up earlier when we were talking about, like, the walk and like it getting very clear. I also think that when you're a visionary, I know how frustrating it can be, is like, I kind of understand where I'm going to go. I have this idea, but it's not clear yet. Mm-hmm. And I want to just remind every visionary and any implementer, anybody out there, that it's okay if it's not clear right away. But sit with that, journal on it, go for those walks, even when you're overwhelmed, because it does get clear. And it might not, like, even if you're trying to name your company or find a service or whatever that looks like, you're like, I know it's there. I know what I don't want. And then the more that you sit with it, all of a sudden one day it's going to be like, oh, there's my answer. Right. And so I think people also don't give it enough time. We just move on. And the visionaries, it's like, if you can stay that path just a little bit more, it will reveal itself. It's just, staying strong with that.
Yeah. So we're running a little short on time. I had more questions for you, but I'm gonna jump to this one, because I think this one you might have to think a second. But after working with so many visionary leaders, what do you think separates the founders who eventually build something meaningful from the ones who never quite get there?
Belief in self continues to come up. And it comes up for me because when you have a vision, it is very easy to also destroy it in your brain too.
Okay.
You can also, or you can stay the path. And I think the self-belief and the confidence within yourself is very important for a visionary. I think it's important for them to know, like, I'm not going to have all the answers. Like, there's a lot of humbling moments, I would say, in the visionary world. There's a lot of moments where your ego has to be put to the side as well. But self-reflection and self-belief, I'm going to use the word self in every word, because if you think about it, self-awareness has that word, self-confidence, self-control, like, all of these words have self. And the reason why is we have to look internally. I also am really big on, as well as, what's the purpose? What's your purpose? If you're doing it to, become a billionaire, you can listen to any podcast out there, and these billionaires are still finding some type of way that they don't have their purpose. And so find your purpose along the way. Okay. The money does follow.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for people to know, is like, don't lose that part of you along the way. And also, if you have a vision, hold it. It might veer off a little bit, but stand strong there, because it's easy to be, you can have other people, like if you have investors and things, have something to say, but you had the vision the whole time of where it could go.
Oh, that's great. And that's Something I really wanted to extract out of this is especially for the younger entrepreneurs and younger visionaries, which is kind of what we're making this for, is to help that younger generation is maybe you can come up a little faster than us if you learn some of these lessons that have taken us so long to learn. Right?
Amen. Give them all the things. I think it's just so important because I think we've all learned so many hard things. I also think that, when you learn yourself faster, I don't know if that's possible, but it is you have the tools and resources. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, that's great. So Lisa, I guess that's it for today. So really appreciate you.
Yeah, it was great to chat about this stuff. I loved it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we might have to have a follow-up because I couldn't even get through all these questions. So thank you again for being here.
Absolutely.
As I reflect on this conversation, there's a pattern that keeps coming up. Being a visionary isn't just about seeing what's possible. It's about learning how to live with that vision, how to manage the chaos that comes with it, and how to bring the right people along for the journey. And what stood out to me is that many of the traits that drive founders forward can also be the very things that hold them back. Restlessness, control, the constant drive to achieve more. None of those are inherently bad, but without awareness, they can quietly limit how far someone actually goes. Lisa said something I think is worth sitting with. Self-awareness is the skill, not just noticing patterns, but being willing to walk through that door and actually make the change. Because the founders who build something meaningful aren't the ones with the best ideas. They're the ones who learn to understand themselves, trust their instincts, and surround themselves with the right people to bring those ideas to life. And maybe that's the real takeaway. You don't need to become something different to build something great. You need to understand how you already think and learn how to work with it. If you found value in this conversation, the best way you can support this podcast is simply by subscribing or following the show. It helps these conversations reach more builders, entrepreneurs, and innovators who might benefit from the stories and lessons shared here. Until next time, build wisely.